Welcome, everyone. This is Monet, the creator, and I'm so excited to welcome you all to another episode of Navigating the Hidden Curriculum. So, first and foremost, I created this podcast because becoming a scientist is not necessarily the easiest path. In fact, many people have very nonlinear paths, and because of this, it turns into a bit of a hidden curriculum. And so, the goal of this podcast is to share the scientific journey of others, as I believe this is one of the best ways that we can learn what the best paths for ourselves may be in science. I'm so excited to introduce you all to our guest, Sharday Ewell. Growing up in multiple military installations around the world, Sharday is a profound Air Force brat. Even though she calls the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, or the DMV, her home, throughout her life, she has always been extremely interested in science and set her sights on a career in science while she was in elementary school. Following her graduation from high school, Sharday enrolled at Norfolk State University as a de minimis scholar, or the Desorts National Institute for Mathematics and Applied Sciences. After completing her undergraduate studies, Sharday then went on to complete a doctoral degree in neurobiology in the Thiebert Lab at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. Currently, Sharday conducts discipline-based education research on biology education and STEM equity. While her interests are broad, she is especially interested in student study behaviors, academic help seeking, and identifying the factors that influence the use of these learning strategies. Ultimately, she hopes to help instructors develop strategies that improve the development of these skills for all biology students. Prior to starting her position at University of Mississippi, she was a Teach for America Corps member and a middle school science teacher in North Carolina, Virginia, Washington, D.C. for 7 years. Sharday then went on to join the Ballin Lab at Auburn University as a postdoctoral fellow. And before we get started with the interview, I wanted to share how me and Sharday met because it's a very interesting connection. So we are both part of an international organization called Black and Neuro. This is a nonprofit organization. It has goals to connect, celebrate, and amplify Black voices in neuroscience from early undergraduate stages to PI levels or principal investigators, everyone in between. She served as one of the panel members of one of the panels last year, and she was sharing about her interest in STEM education equity and how she returned to academia despite the stigma that currently exists around leaving academia and then getting back into academia. I just want to give her a special shout out because she's an amazing mentor and has helped me realize that although there are many steps that we can take as we continue through our educational journey, our PhD journey, or career development, what's most important is taking a step. There's no such thing as a right or a wrong step. And I already know she has some amazing points to share. So let's get right into it and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah. So, I know a little bit about your story, but the viewers would love to hear more about your story, especially about how, you took that step with Teach for America and the return to academia. So let's talk a little bit more about that non-traditional path of yours.
Yeah, sure. So we're going to skip like the early stuff, right?
Yeah.
College. Um, so during my grad school tenure, right, I found myself being burnt out. I was in a situation that really wasn't ideal. I was left to my own devices a lot of the time. And over time, this really does take a toll on you. It's very isolating. And for me, around year 4 of my grad program, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm done. But a lot of once you hit that 4th and 5th year, you're too far in to just walk away with a master's. At least that's how I felt. Like I've gone too far. I'm not just the master's. I'm going to get my PhD. So I stuck it out. But while I was doing that, I was thinking ahead to, okay, well, what can I do since I'm not going in that traditional path of grad school, postdoc, tenure track position? So, in figuring this out, I found that I really enjoyed teaching. My second year of grad school, I got involved with Brain Awareness Week events at UAB and helped with the planning of that. So not only planning the event, but planning a lot of the instructional activities, and just found that I enjoyed it and thought to myself, this could probably be a good path to explore, at least for a few years while I tried to figure out the rest of my life. So Fast forward to, me finishing up my PhD. I took the step and applied for Teach for America. I felt like it would be a good entry point into education without requiring me to have to go through school all over again. I had done too much schooling at that point. And I was fortunate enough to get accepted into the 2014 Corps, got placed in North Carolina, a little town called Kinston. And I taught seventh grade science there for 2 years. Absolutely love it. There's something about education and teaching that I am just super passionate about. Like I feel like that is something that I am here on this earth to do. I am an educator at heart, no doubt. The kids, they're not kids anymore, they are grown-ups, but they were just amazing. I really enjoyed my time there. And at the end of my Teach for America commitment, I knew that I wanted to continue teaching, but it wasn't going to be in North Carolina because North Carolina is terrible as it relates to teacher pay. So it just
Yeah.
wasn't going to happen there. I wound up moving back home to Virginia and I taught in a charter school for a year. And I have very strong opinions about charter schools, which is probably
Mm.
another podcast altogether. And following that year, I went back and taught eighth grade science in Prince William County, Virginia, which is my home county. And that's pretty much
Mm.
where I was until about January 2021 when I started my postdoc. Now, while I,
Ooh.
yeah, yeah. Now, while I'm doing all of this teaching in middle school, I would say somewhere around my fourth year of teaching middle school, I'm like, all right, I'm back. I'm ready for science again. Like, I guess that it took me that much time to be that removed from my grad school experience to be like, okay, well, I really do enjoy research. I like it. I want to get
Mm.
back to it. What can I do? What can I do to get a position at the college level? And so I took the steps to get an adjunct position at a local community college and a local four-year college, which was fantastic. And I really began thinking strongly about, okay, well, how can I make this a full-time thing? How can I get back to research? And after reaching out to previous mentors, we kind of all came to the conclusion it was going to be exceptionally difficult. At that point, I was
Mm.
too far removed from the lab. My skill set was out of date. So to continue on in neuroscience, I would have been really hard pressed to find a mentor who would have been willing to train me
Yeah.
as a postdoc, which is unfortunate. I feel like the part of the postdoc is to gain new skills, so why not? But be that as it may, that's where we were.
Yeah.
We were, you know? And so I really had to take the time to think about, well, what is out there that really integrates the totality of my experience? It's not like I had been sitting around for several years. I've actually been doing something and developing skills in a whole another domain. And it
Mm-hmm.
just so happened after attending a professional development opportunity, the Summer Institutes for Scientific Teaching, I came across scholarly work that focused on biology education research. So there are educators out here who are doing research. So they're in academia and this is their focus. And I thought to myself, this could be something that I could do. This is something that leverages everything that I've done. And a little while after that opportunity, I came across a job ad for a postdoc position at Auburn University. I'm looking at the requirements. Okay, I got a PhD. That's fine. I have a passion for STEM equity. Oh, of course. I have background in education. I can do this thing. So I send my materials along to the PI. The PI reaches out to me and says, hey, we filled that position, but I feel like your experience and expertise would be a great addition to the lab. Let's collaborate on a grant. And so, starting August of 2019, me and the PI met bi-weekly. We worked on this grant, submitted it in October of 2019. Now, mind you, I'm still teaching full time. Like, I don't recommend this to anybody. I don't know how I managed it. to balance all of this, but I did. Um, Submitted it October 2019. Months go by, the world shuts down because, Rona. And in April of 2020, got the news that the grant wasn't funded, was kind of bummed and like, okay, well, what do I do now? And kind of just resigned myself to teaching middle school.
Mm.
In July of 2020, the PI emails me and says, hey, I have some funding that will support you for 2 years. I want you to come down to Auburn. If you're still interested,
Wow.
there's funding for you. And of course, I jumped at the opportunity and started in that position in 2021, January 2021. So not a linear path. I didn't have a roadmap. It really was a lot of me taking the attitude of the worst that anybody could tell me is no.
Yeah.
You know, I could ask
Hmm.
and we'll see what happens from there. And it's worked out.
Yeah. Yeah. And then so from Auburn, how did you end up at Mississippi?
Yes. So after being at Auburn for about 2 years, I had to hit the job market as much as I wanted to stay a postdoc forever. It just couldn't happen. So fall of 2022 hit the job market and the University of Mississippi was the first application I put in. So
Mm.
and that was unexpected to me. I thought, okay, this is going to be my test case. We'll see what I get wrong, you know, and 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 pay that forward to whatever the next application I fill out. And it just so happened, put this application in. They scheduled me for a Zoom interview shortly thereafter. That went well. They invited me on campus. And it just turned out, despite some of the negative connotations that Mississippi has, because I know
Yeah.
Mississippi, right?
Yeah.
I found the campus and the surrounding community to be extremely welcoming and a lot more progressive than one would think or one might suspect based on some of the recent events that have happened on campus. There is an event
Right.
on campus here that went viral, but that's not representative of the campus community here. It's just not. And I'm not saying that because they pay me. Like I'm saying that because it's true.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I just fell in love with it. And what I really liked was that this department was very intentional about committing to biology education research. They knew what they wanted, they knew what it should look like. They had a very clear idea as to how I would integrate into the department
Mm.
as someone who is not doing traditional bench work, but instead is very computer based. So all of those things just aligned, and here I am.
Okay. Okay, so I have like a number of questions off
Right.
off of just this first introduction, but I first actually want to ask, going back to you joining and deciding to do Teach for America, like what were the narratives or the thoughts of the people around you whenever you decided like, okay, I'm going to graduate with this PhD and then I'm going to do Teach for America? Because that is something that like I've never heard anyone else say that. Not to say that it's a bad idea, and I fully like encourage people to do things like that. But what kinds of things were people saying to you, and how did you mentally just keep pushing to say, all right, I'm going to keep doing this, and wherever I end up, I'm going to end up?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Because, yeah, you're right. This is not the normal path for anybody. And even though no one outright said it when I would express my plans, it was almost the feedback I felt like I was getting was almost like this sense of not rejection, but
Yeah.
disappointment.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like, oh my gosh, Sharday, you are such an amazing scientist. Why are you doing that? Like that's the vibe.
Yeah.
Even though nobody outright said that to me, it just came off in their demeanor. And so in a lot of ways, I did feel like I was taking a step back. I did
Mm.
question myself a bit in terms of my decision. But in contrast to that, what I did know is that I didn't want to do bench work. Like I felt very strongly about that, you know,
Yeah.
and there was no sense in me trying to push forward to do something that I didn't want to do because of what others expected of me. So
Yeah.
what me being stubborn is just, part of it. And then I also looked at it at the time. Like at the time, I didn't look at it as, oh, I'm going to go and teach for 7 years. That just kind of happened. At the time, I was looking at it like, well, it's only a 2-year commitment. I could do this for 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
figure out what it is I want to do, and, take it from there.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like in a lot of ways, it wasn't any different than what some of my other classmates were doing. I had classmates who graduated with a PhD and then went to law school,
Oh,
graduated with
wow.
a PhD and then went to pharmacy school
Oh, wow.
or
Yeah.
veterinary school. So,
Yeah.
oh yeah, so I was surrounded by people who were deciding to do other things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And a lot of that, at least at the time that I came through, and it's probably still the case now, when I was coming through, I think they were starting to reckon with the fact that there are a lot of PhD students who are going to be coming out with
Mm-hmm.
PhDs and not
Yep.
enough senior track faculty jobs. Like
Yep.
that, my time in school, that's when it was really starting to be like evident. And that's
Yeah.
when you really started to have folks go out and find other things to do that's not that traditional path.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, just mixed feelings. On one hand,
Mm-hmm.
like I'm not doing what it is that I'm supposed to do or what I was trained for, but also feeling like what I'm doing is no different than what my other classmates are doing, given the job market at the time.
Yeah. And even really recently, I saw a statistic that said, like between 1% and 2% of PhD, like people
Mhm.
that graduate with their PhD will even end up staying in tenured positions like in the long run, which is like, all right, so what about the other 99% of people? Like there is so much. And
Right.
this kind of like gets at the fact that, and I hope that viewers will start to understand this more as I do more podcast episodes, that like the PhD and the skill sets that you get during the PhD can apply to so many different things. And historically academia and industry have been like the primary two things that people will see. Then of course there's the consulting, there's science policy, there's a couple of other different options that come up that aren't venture capital, a couple of other different things that come up too. But I think people are failing to realize, like, for example, in the entertainment industry, they might have a laboratory in this television show, and they want to have PhD researchers come and fact check things to make sure they're portraying things correctly. That is not a way that anybody has ever like illustrated a PhD being used in my
Mm-hmm.
experience so far, but I know it's out there because I started just questioning and figuring out like what more can I do with this, because the skill sets are just so applicable to too many careers
So
and
many,
so many things.
many things. What you mentioned, that's an option. I remember one of my friends in grad school telling me about scientific illustration. Like
Yeah.
there are people that could do that. You could really do anything you want with a PhD, and
Mhm.
nobody should feel confined to working in a lab if that's not what they want to do. Like you don't
Yeah.
have to. Part of
Yeah.
part of life is figuring out, okay, well, I'm passionate about this, but not this so much, and it's fine.
Yeah, yeah. And it's really unfortunate that the narrative that's pushed is very much like, oh, like you're a traitor because you're not staying in like academia, you're not staying. And it's not healthy, of course, for the individual that's choosing to do that. But it's also just not very accurate, because another thing that I've noticed is that a lot of people speak from the experience of what they have. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, is like if you go to your PI or go to academics for advice on career things, like they're gonna speak from the aspect of like, academia is a secure job. This is what you should do. This is the path you should do. And it's like, no, actually, that's not the case now. It's changed completely. There's so many things I can do with this degree.
And ultimately, I don't want to. Like, there's nothing,
Yeah.
there's probably nothing appealing about
Mhm.
being in academia. And
Yeah.
that's fine, you know? But
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and then honestly, relating to all of this, like, so from doing this Teach for America, you said 7 years, and then coming back on the postdoc market, how was it returning to your postdoc? Was the postdoc more, it was less wet lab to my
yeah.
understanding, but how was it returning to the postdoc after all of the Teach for America things were said and done?
Oh my gosh. So coming back into lab after teaching. So the biggest thing that I had to adjust to is a lack of a set schedule, right? Teaching,
Mm,
my day was pretty much cut out for me. I'm up at 5:30, I'm at the school by 7:30, school starts at 8, and what am I doing from 8 to 3? I'm in front of children. So,
mhm.
so that's
Yeah.
set. And then once school is out, I'm preparing for the next day. When I was adjuncting, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to the community college to go teach. Like everything was very just cut and dry, straightforward for me. Coming back into that postdoc and coming back to I mean, yeah, you have to be in lab, but figure it out, whatever works for you,
Hmm.
getting used to that and not having things set in stone was an adjustment. Um,
Hmm.
and really just different stressors with teaching, stressors, not so much the kids, because kids are going to be kids wherever, but
Hmm.
dealing with other adults in the building and dealing with parents and
Hmm.
making sure you're hitting what you need to hit to prepare the students for the standardized tests at the end of the year. Those are their own stressors, but coming back into the lab, the stressors just shift. Like, okay, I'm in this field that's new to me because
Yeah.
bioed was new to me at the time, and I'm feeling like I need to catch up. Like I don't know what's happening.
Hmm.
I don't know what the norms are. I'm trying to build up a network. Um, and at the same time, I felt like I was trying to compensate for everything that I did not do as a grad student. As a grad student, I didn't network. I'm super introverted, super shy. And
Hmm.
at grad school, I'm like, I don't need to talk to nobody. I didn't see the need for it. And coming back is like, no, I need to network. I see the need for collaboration and seeking those opportunities out. So I'm going to do it to the point where I'm overextending myself on projects. I'm
Hmm.
pushing myself to give talks more and more at different conferences because that just wasn't what I did in grad school. And
Hmm.
I feel like in some regards that could have been a detriment to me. Like I do often wonder, had I done those things, what my trajectory would have looked like, but everything
Yeah.
happens for a reason. So, it's new stress, a lot of pressure on me to get it right
Hmm.
this time. I'm like, I'm old to mess this up. And but other than that, it felt good to be back in that environment, to do what I was trained to do, to think in the way that I was trained to think. So
Yeah.
lots of mixed up. I know that was kind of all over the place, but
Yeah, but thinking about it, I feel like the same could really be said for someone that if graduates with their PhD in biomedical engineering. This is one of my friends, for example, and then ends up joining a very wet lab science lab. Like it's
yeah.
very much different. It's less of that theoretical engineering type stuff, and you're actually like bread and butter, like these zebrafish and these mice, like how is this working?
Yes.
And so I feel like, that whole relearning the
Yes.
system kind of happens regardless of like how much your topic changes from your original lab or the original research you were doing. So yeah, like give yourself some grace. We're still killing
Thank you.
it.
Thank you.
And then yeah, I have one more question about before I get to some general questions, but I wanted to ask you about that Denemis, not fellowship, that's not the word I'm looking for, the Denemis scholar situation that you were a part of. So I wanted you to share a little bit more about this because I had never heard of it, and I think that it'd be good information to get out there.
Oh, yes, definitely. So, DeNemis is a program at Norfolk State University, which is a HBCU in Virginia. that is aimed at increasing minority participation in the sciences. So in that program, each scholar is able to major in some sort of STEM field. So biology, chemistry, mathematics. There are a couple of engineering options, and computer science and physics. And within that program, we take a very rigorous program of study. So we're taking anywhere between 17 and 21 credit hours each semester. And at the time, that program was a full ride. So I was able to go to college for free, room and board
Yeah.
taken care of, the whole nine. That has changed within recent years,
Mm.
but there, the aim is still the same, to increase minority participation. Now, within that program, we are given mentorship in terms of, okay, how to get to the next step. So we were told pretty frequently and and early that, okay, you need to participate in research internships, and this is what you need to do while you're doing them, and here are some
Mm.
opportunities that you can take advantage of. They were really intentional about ensuring that not only were we admitted to college as these scholars, but we graduate from college with these degrees. So
Mm.
we had a lot of peer tutoring, peer mentoring in terms of how we can be successful in our fields of choice. So just an opportunity to major in these subjects and have this nice supportive community of students who look like you, who are doing the same things as you, experiencing the same challenges as you, and then also having faculty who are invested in your success. So that is the program in a nutshell. And for those
Mm.
who might be listening, it is very similar to the Meyerhoff Scholars Program at UMBC, which is a PWI, but concept is still the same, to increase minority participation in the sciences.
Yeah. And so, like, just out of curiosity, I don't know how much you would know about this, but are programs like Denimis, like, is this something newer, or is this something that like various specific institutions, because it seems like each institution might have their own kind of branch for something like that. Like, is this something that and applying for colleges like that you would see frequently, something that's specifically targeting minority participation in the sciences?
Yeah, it's something that has been around for a while. Like the Denimas program has been
Okay.
around since the 80s.
Oh, wow.
I
Okay.
want to say the Meyerhoff Scholars Program has been around since the early 90s,
Mm-hmm.
but it's very specific to the institution. So it's not something that's
Mm.
offered widespread at, you know, multiple institutions across the United States. So
Right.
you would have to know to look for something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah, I think that's the point of the question, is like you have to know to look for something
yeah.
like that. Yeah.
And really, to be honest, I came across the Denimas program not because I knew to look for that, but because a flyer got sent to me in the mail
Wow.
about it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I wouldn't have known to look for that.
Yeah. Yeah, wow. That's it's always so incredible how small decisions or small like whispers, I like to call them, kind
Yes.
of end up completely changing our lives, honestly. I wish I would have known something or known of some type of program like this when I was an undergrad, because I know my undergraduate institution wasn't super research focused, I feel like, but even less so on like the minority front.
Mhm.
Um, what can you do?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so now I want to get into some of my general questions I have for you, just to, you know, tease your science memory, tease your science experience. So, what is your earliest memory of your interest in science?
Ooh, my earliest memory. I would have to say fourth grade stands out. And I think it's because fourth grade was the first year where we actually had a science class, right? Elementary
Mm-hmm.
school, you have your main teacher that teaches all your other subjects, right?
Yeah.
And then for an hour a day, we would go to the science classroom with Mr. Kent and do science stuff, which I absolutely loved. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I remember doing was building like these little mini ecosystems in the
Ooh.
bottles, right?
Ooh,
So you have
yeah.
2 soda bottles, 2-liter bottles attached to each other. And on the top half, you have your sort of land ecosystem, and you have like your grass and crickets and whatever else was in that bottle. And then at the bottom, you have, it's been so long, I'm trying to remember. And then in the bottom, you have your aquatic ecosystem. So in
Yeah.
that bottle, we had like a snail, because they're kind of cleaning up everything, and like a little fish. Like, it was really cool. And I just remember setting it up and listening to the teacher talk about like the differences between the two and what all of these things mean. And I just thought it was so cool. And I kind of just took to that. I think the questions about life and the whole process of inquiry, that just always stood out to me. It just made my little heart sing. And and I stuck with that. I always carried that with me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. And how did you know that science was the best career path for you? Or was there a point in which you were like, yes, like research science, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life?
Research science. So it took me longer to get to research science. And I was
Mm,
actually just telling 2 students about this. So when I entered into college, I came in as a pre-med major. So
as a lot of us do.
going up to college, I was like, I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be a pediatric neurologist. That was the
Yep.
goal, right? So I'm like, I'm ready. I got this. And the summer before my senior year of college, I did a summer undergraduate research experience at the
Hmm.
Medical University of South Carolina. And
Hmm.
I absolutely loved the experience. I loved being in lab. I loved working with the cells. I loved everything about it. And my lab was super supportive. They were asking me, "Oh, Sharday, what are you going to do after you graduate?" And I would say, "Oh, I'm going to go to med school. I'm going to take the MCAT in August," and like still full steam ahead on this med school thing.
Hmm.
And the lab members, in that lab were saying, "No, you should probably go to grad school." And I'm like, well, I don't know. And then by the end of the summer, they had at least shifted me to thinking, well, I'll just do the MD PhD program. That's where I was at the end of the summer, right? And they were like, yeah, you shouldn't do that either. You should go to grad school, right? And that's fine. I get back to college, and before the semester starts, I take the MCAT, and I bombed it. I'm not gonna lie, I did not do well. And I had some decisions to make at that point.
Yeah.
Following that, I said, I'm not taking this test again. Again, me being stubborn, like when I know I don't want to do something, I'm not gonna do it. And that was
Yeah.
what I wasn't gonna do. I'm like, I'm not taking this again. So but I gotta do something. What am I gonna do? I'm like, well, I really enjoy doing research. Well, that's what I'm doing. I'm going to grad school. And it was just like that. Like, okay, what do I got to do to get into grad school? And okay, some programs need the GRE. Okay, I'm going to take it, but I'm only taking it once. And like,
Yeah.
I don't like standardized tests. I don't know if you can
Yeah, I don't either. I
yeah,
think it's ridiculous. But
it's ridiculous. Yeah, I'm not a fan. So from there, I started getting my application materials together, personal statement, um, getting my CV together, scheduling a GRE date, got that in, and applied to 3 schools, UAB being one of them. And getting into the neuroscience program at UAB was
Mhm.
actually there were some other things that play with that, because initially I applied to another program at UAB. I applied to the cellular, molecular, and developmental program
Mm.
at UAB.
Mhm.
And in looking at my application materials, somebody
Ooh.
noticed I had neuroscience all up and through my application materials, because that was still an
Mhm.
interest of mine. I've always been interested in the brain since about middle school. And so they were like, hey, we notice you have a bunch of neuroscience stuff in your application. So we're going to pass your application onto the neuroscience theme.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and I thought that was that was really interesting that they decided to do that, because for some
Yeah.
programs, they would have
They
saw that
just,
and been like, they would have rejected it.
yep. Yep.
Whatever. But the fact that someone said, no,
Yeah.
person's interest is neuro, we have a neuro theme. I'm gonna walk this across the hall and give them the materials. And it just so happened that, they liked what they saw. They invited me down for an interview and I wound up getting accepted there. So it's,
Wow.
I say to students all the time, sometimes it really matters who is in the room on a given day.
Yep.
So much of this is chance, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah, and I hate to
Yeah.
say it.
Yeah. And that goes for like grant
Yeah,
writing, grant, except all of it. It's just a
all of
matter
it.
of like who was in the room, who was contributing, who had some 2 cents,
Mm,
viable 2 cents to put
Bible.
into the application pool because like and sometimes it might even be about the people that are next to you in the application pool, not even about your own application. You would have been an outstanding applicant the year prior, but this
Mhm.
year there was this many people that took gap years and all of them had this experience, so it made them better fit. Like it's a lot of the times beyond your control. And
Yeah.
I really like to emphasize to people, like when it comes to graduate school application, when it comes to like applying for grants, all of it, like seriously, don't take it personally because
It's
there are
not.
way too many factors at play that could
Mhm.
either get you in a situation where you end up in a better fit program
Yep.
or you just end up not getting accepted because there's just a lot of factors at play.
Exactly.
So thank you for sharing that and being vulnerable. Like that is definitely like more of the narrative I want people to see, that like it's okay to like do something and your answer is no, like taking the MCAT and being like, I didn't do so
I
good.
did my best.
I
It's
did my
not gonna
best,
happen.
didn't do good, and I know that that's not what I'm
It's
doing.
not what I want to do. And my mom at the time said, like, it's not what you want to do. Med school's not what you wanted to do, because if it was really in you to do
Mm-hmm.
it, you would have
Yep.
taken that test over and
Yep.
over and over again until you.
Yep.
And I'm like, you're absolutely right. And a very early story from my mom, a lesson from my mom, just about doing what you're passionate about, and
Mm-hmm.
going with that.
Yeah, even when it's the less traveled path. Because I feel like even though a lot of people definitely go to grad school, I feel like people will like, okay, I introduced myself when I was at University of Miami and I say, oh, I'm in neuroscience. Oh, so you're going to med school? No. Like by
No,
default, I'm going to med school. Or like I say, oh, I'm a student at Harvard Medical School. And it's like, oh, so you're in medical school? No. Like
they also do research.
yeah, like they also do research. Like, all those how you see Harvard in the news all the time. Like, there are reasons why we're in the news all the time outside of bad things, but there
Right?
are research reasons why we're in the news all the time. So, yes.
Yeah, totally understand.
Yeah. And so with all that said, like how would you say that you navigated a hidden curriculum? Like what things might have been part of a hidden curriculum and you figuring out grad school was the best path for you? And then like, by chance, this application getting shifted to this other pool and everything.
Yeah, so in navigating that hidden curriculum, I think the fact that I was even at that undergraduate research experience that kind of put me
Mm-hmm.
on that path to grad school was something that had to be navigated. And I
Mm.
say that because I remember my first year at UAB, I was doing a rotation in the lab, and I was talking to an undergrad student at the time who was probably like in their fifth year, but just at that point talking about, oh, well, I need to get research experience. And
Oh,
I remember
wow. Yeah.
looking at him like, you didn't know you needed to get that? And he was like, no, I didn't. I'm just now finding out. And it just had me reflect on my experience as a Denemis scholar and being in a situation where we
Mm.
were told repeatedly, nah, you need to do this. Med school, grad school, it doesn't matter. You need to get research experience. So
Mm-hmm.
I think I took it for granted in college that I was having this consistently drilled into my head to the point where it felt like a norm. And then having to be confronted with the fact that you have a student at this larger, predominantly white institution where that information is not made available to them.
Yeah.
Kind of like, if you know, great. If you don't, oh
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
That's definitely one of the big things about navigating a hidden curriculum. Now, within graduate school, I found that there was a hidden curriculum in terms of getting yourself out there. I think so much of academia is not so much what you know in, intellectually. It's really about who you know and who you collaborate with and all the network building that goes into that. Um, Back in grad school, I just, like I said, I did not see the importance of networking. I didn't think it necessary. If I knew my stuff, then what's the problem? Yeah, well, people have to know who you are. That's how you build a name for yourself. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that's what I tell my undergraduate students now. Like, I get it. You don't want to talk to folks. It sucks, but you need to do it. You need to get yourself out there. There's no way around it. Unfortunately. So that's just more so trial and error. Like looking back, old me looking back at young me, like, dang girl, you should have gotten over yourself a little bit. Did what you needed to do. Um,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah,
So
but there's a lot that comes into play with that, and the narrative of scientists being very antisocial, private, like, all of these various traits that kind of come with the personality of being a scientist. We're critical thinkers, not so much socializers. Like it's really hard. And the
mhm.
truth is, like, there's such a benefit to being uncomfortable because you know that in discomfort you are growing. That is one way that I really like to see it. And it can be really hard to do that, like I just said, but like there's definitely a benefit in doing that networking or going to that event to find out about this person that you should connect with that has this opportunity. Like it's always some like crazy string line that just never has that linear path that we've been talking about. Like it's never
Right.
really a linear path. It's you knew this person that knew this person in the office, and then this person knew this person, and like, yeah.
Yeah, but it can set you up for so much success, though. You don't,
Hmm.
just by tapping into a network, it opens up opportunities for you
Hmm.
that you probably wouldn't be able to get on your own.
Yeah.
And I think just kind of thinking of how all things work together, I think part of what helped me with the networking, or at least getting better at it, was my teaching. Having to speak
Mm.
in front of over 100 eighth graders or seventh graders every day kind of
Yeah.
gets you over yourself really quickly because middle schoolers are mean. Like they're just, and not intentionally, it's just that they're going
Yeah.
to tell you what's what, and
Yep.
you kind of have to deal with it. So I think in that regard, you kind of get over, well, what if I sound stupid? Listen, if I didn't have this 13-year-old, fry me up for saying something stupid, I'll be fine dealing with adults. Like, know.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And also just related to one of the things you kind of like grazed over, but I feel like is really important, but like just because you're at a larger institution or a more reputed institution does not necessarily mean that you get to be put ahead or anything of that nature. And this kind of goes back to an interview I did with Teresa Lee. We actually talked a lot about um, R1 institutions and just the different levels for research institutions. And she just really brought to my attention how those lower level, like the R2, the R3 institutions, where they focus more on the teaching, like a lot of people kind of look down on those institutions because they're not R1 institutions. But at the same time, these schools approach teaching and a lot of mentorship with so much intentionality that the students end up having sometimes a better understanding of some skills just simply because their school takes that time to prioritize that. Like I just mentioned, like my undergraduate institution, University of Miami, like, yes, we have an office for research and students that are interested in research. I'll be honest with you, it was definitely not like the type of resources that I feel like would have been super helpful, if that makes sense. And maybe I just wasn't in the right place. But then at the same time, that goes down to like just knowing the right people, knowing the right programs, knowing the right situations to join or people to connect with, whatever it is, so that you can get those skills, like knowing that you need to have a research experience at X amount of time or this many research hours, or like I know I'm very fortunate that like I went into undergrad actually knowing that I wanted to do research and knowing that I wanted to go to grad school. So I always knew like, okay, I know I need research experience at some point. Where do I do that? How do I do that? When am I doing that?
Right.
But like if you're not already knowing about that, and you like 90% of biology majors that start undergrad as pre-med, like well, what do you do? Like whenever you find out down the line, like, actually, I don't want to do this. Well, okay, I'm in like year 3 and like there's only a year left and I need to show something for these graduate applications. Like, yeah, it's really hard to figure out that hidden curriculum piece whenever like you would think your institution would provide those resources to you, but that's just not the case. Like some institutions just do not prioritize that work or that area, that field, that, yeah.
I agree with that. I think about this a lot, and I think about younger me, right? And thinking about, okay, what college do I want to go to? I was one
Mhm.
of those students who very early on said, I want to go to a HBCU. After spending the bulk of my K through 12 being in an educational system where a lot of times I really was the minority, or if I was in a situation where, I'm not underrepresented, within the school, once I get into the honors classes that I sit in,
Mhm.
one of a few,
Yep.
and after graduating high school, I'm like, I'm done with this. I need a break for like 4 years. And so I really wanted to go to an HBCU. And looking back at my experience, you're right. HBCUs historically, they prioritize some of that teaching and mentoring a lot more. And so that really helped me not only find my way or get through my courses, while I was there, but it also helped me to think ahead. So
Yeah.
something I'm realizing, no matter where you are in school, you don't have the luxury to think of, okay, well, this is where I am now and that's it. No, you always have to be 2 steps ahead. What am I going to do after this? Grad school, same way. I'm in grad school now. We're going to say the PhD is a foregone conclusion. You're going to get it. What are you going to do next? What does
Mhm.
that look like? How are you going to make it happen? And
Mhm.
Norfolk State was really good about getting me to think about that. And
Yeah.
I would not give up that experience for anything in the
Wow.
world.
That's
Now,
amazing.
yeah, but like, what does that mean for people at PWIs? Because there's somebody watching, like, well, yeah, that's great, but I don't go to an HBC minority learning institution. And I think for those who might be at larger institutions, well, you know what? Now it's a little bit more on you to kind of seek that out. You have to seek out
Yep.
that mentorship and those professors who you feel you can ask them about these things. And
Mhm.
and coming from the professor position and interacting with students at an R1 institution, I am
Mhm.
finding that students feel like I'm a little bit more approachable, and they ask me about, well, what does this next step look like? What should I do? Can you read these materials for me? What does that look like? And that wouldn't have happened if they didn't take that chance and just ask,
Yeah.
because they don't know either. They're just trying to
Mhm.
figure out who can I turn to? And
Mhm.
unfortunately, sometimes some professors aren't as approachable,
Yeah.
but again, worst anybody can tell you is no. It's not
Mhm.
fatal. If they tell you no, you know who not to mess with.
Yep. Yep.
Keep-
Yeah, rejection is just redirection. There's probably somebody better that is more willing
Exactly.
to help and support you if that is the case. That's all that says, honestly.
Exactly.
And one last thing I just want to touch on before I move on to the next question is like, whenever I was applying to undergrad institutions, like since I knew that I wanted to do research, like and I didn't look like very heavily into HBCUs, but in the ones that I did, they didn't really have opportunities for research at the institutions. And that was like really disappointing to me because I was like, well, like if that's the case, then I don't even know if it would be worth me going to this HBCU. And then I feel like there's also this kind of under the table talk about HBCU credibility and how credible a degree from an HBCU is versus another institution. But then to have this conversation with you and you to be a part of this program that really was serving minorities and helping them find their right path, it's just like, like that is, it kind of goes back to that same thing we started the episode with, like the narrative that the people around you tell you, because someone sometimes leads you to make a decision that you think is best, but in like the future you realize actually that's not exactly true. Like there was a lot more opportunities that like I just didn't know about because of my proximity and the people that I had around me. And I barely had support outside of my immediate family, but like at my actual institution, like I literally, not my institution, at my actual high school, I literally had like a guidance counselor that literally wouldn't even recognize me for getting my AA degree, like, and like what are you supposed to do with that kind of support trying to
Right.
go into undergrad? Like what do you do whenever people are purposely like wanting to see you fail?
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah, that is tough to contend with. And
Yeah.
I think about that too, that narrative that HBCUs are somehow less than. Well, I
Yeah.
take that back. If it's not like the elite HBCUs, right? If it's not
Yeah.
Howard or Spelman or Morehouse or
Right. Right.
and for whatever reason, it is pervasive, despite
Yeah.
this emphasis on the importance of HBCUs. But a story that I don't really tell often, but I think bears repeating here, it really doesn't matter. I
Yeah.
remember interviewing at UAB and talking to the program director, and she said straight up that the fact that I was in the Denemas program at Norfolk State University actually put me in a good place. It
Mm-hmm.
made me competitive as an applicant for that program.
Wow.
And it didn't matter so much that I was at a HBCU, but looking at the rigor of this program and the kinds of courses I was taking, that
Mm.
put me in a good place.
Mm.
So to that, I'm like, don't listen to anyone who says that an HBCU or any minority serving institution is less than, because
Yeah.
it's not. More times than not, folks aren't looking at the fact that it's whatever minority serving institution. They're looking at, well, what are you taking?
Mm-hmm.
What is the rigor of
Mm-hmm.
it, right?
Yeah.
And if you really want to be real, some of these PWIs inflate their grades. And it's well known.
It is
So what does that
horribly well
mean?
known.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
what does that mean?
Yeah.
I would encourage anybody, like if you want to go to a minority serving institution and you feel like you're going to get what you need out of it, go. Don't let whatever
Yeah.
narrative that people are telling you influence that decision.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so beautiful. I'm glad that we talked all about this because this is like when I think about younger me, like I wish I could have caught myself and been like, actually, like don't like throw in the towel on this. There's still some opportunities out there. And even though some of them probably would have been further from home, I likely would have gotten more direction in what I wanted to do. Like even like doing this PhD and deciding like, oh, like I'm doing this biosciences instead of neuroscience. Maybe I would have figured out like, yes, neuroscience is great, but I actually really like bio. Like I would have realized that up front instead of applying to like half the schools neuroscience and then like two schools biology.
Yeah, but we're all here
You
trying
learn.
to figure it out. Figure it
Yeah.
out. I feel like if anyone doesn't get anything else out of it, none of us have it all figured out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the beauty of life is that you have the ability to try things, decide it doesn't work for you, and try something else. And if
Yep.
that doesn't work, you can try something else, or you can go back. Like none of this is fixed, I think,
Yeah.
is the big takeaway.
Mm-hmm.
We're all works in progress. And
Yeah.
whatever path you choose is the correct path. Like, don't let anyone tell you
Yeah.
otherwise.
Yep. Dropping them knowledge seeds, just like
I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
One can take anything away from that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that would be it. I don't want anyone to feel like if they don't do the prescribed path, then it's all over. You
Yeah.
know,
It's
it's,
not. Yeah. And I definitely want more people to realize like it's okay to have these non-traditional paths because you can actually be very happy and secure and have a job and like survive
all
without doing.
and all the things, and decide if you want to go back and
Mm-hmm.
revisit another path. You can. I mean, even now, I love bioed research. I do, and I have so many ideas for the future. But I'm also thinking, well, I want to do a little bit of bench research, or at least give undergrads an opportunity to do it. So I am
Yeah.
with, okay, how can I get a small bench work sort of research program,
Mm.
started?
Ooh, yeah, I was gonna say we should talk about that a little bit more
Yeah, we should
after this
talk
because
about it. Like,
that sounds
I'm
really
trying to figure it
fun.
out. Yeah, I'm trying to
Yeah.
figure it out. And it didn't occur to me that I could do that until one of
Yeah.
my friends was like, well, Sharday, you're an assistant professor now. You don't need to wait on anybody.
Yeah.
An opportunity. And I'm like, you're right. I don't. I just need to get the money. Okay,
Yep.
we can do this. That sounds like a fantastic idea. And so that is
Mm-hmm.
something I am toying with even now. So nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So got some final questions coming up here. I still got a few, but just some
No
last
worries.
questions. So first I wanted to ask, while you were in your studies, while you were working on your PhD, was there anything that you found difficult and feeling confident of your identity of being a scientist?
Oh gosh,
Yeah.
that is an interesting question. And I would say during my studies, I struggled a lot with imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And not necessarily because anybody ever said anything to make me feel as though I didn't belong. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that was never the case. I think it was just more so me and being hyper aware of
Yeah.
where I was falling short. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I think about my time in grad school and like I could kill my coursework. Like, that made all the sense in the world to me.
Yep.
It wasn't an issue for me. And I was just talking to a student about this. Where I struggled was with understanding scientific journal articles, because I had never really had an
Mm.
opportunity prior to grad school to really think about, well, this is how you read a journal article. This is what this section means. Like, I never had anyone parse it out to me in that way. And so I would approach these articles like reading a novel, which, as we both know, manuscripts are the best sleeping aids ever created. Like,
Yep.
it, it is what it is. And I just remember at that time, having to attend journal clubs and really dissect and decipher these articles. And like, I couldn't do it because of how I was approaching it. Now I realize that now, but it just didn't make sense to me. And I'm sitting in class and they're having this really dynamic sort of
Yep.
conversation. And I'm sitting
Mm-hmm.
here like, I don't know I don't know what happened. And just feeling like, okay, well, do I really belong here? Like, did they make a
Mm-hmm.
mistake? And admitting me. And so having to kind of get over that, and I don't think in a lot of ways I really ever did get over that. And I only say that because my committee, bless them, I can see their vision now, but as a grad student, I couldn't see it. My committee was really intent on me speaking confidently about the science. They felt like, Sharday, you know
Mm-hmm.
it, but you're not speaking confidently at all. And they said they were not going to let me get my PhD until I could
Wow.
speak with confidence about the science. So I
Yeah.
think I think that's something that really was a barrier for me as I navigated through. And
Mm-hmm.
at that time, I didn't really get over it. I think me getting older, actually going to go teach and having to teach these children, science, that actually helped build my confidence
Yeah.
a bit more, because it's like, okay, I'm talking to folks. There's
Mhm.
nobody in this room that can tell me nothing about what it is I'm talking about. It took me doing that to get that sort of mindset that I needed in grad school, but they didn't happen in
Yeah.
grad.
Yeah. And that's okay. It's definitely, I mean, we all come in with varying experiences and all of these things in labs, from keeping the lab notebook to reading the papers to being able to write out a proposal, write something convincing, understand your rationale, pull multiple ideas. Like all of those things are hard to learn. And then on top of that, like at least in my situation and being at like a really prestigious institution, like then being surrounded by all of those voices of like, and I know this about the paper and I know this about the author and this second author did this. And it's like, oh my God, like I barely even read the author's names. Like this is crazy.
Right? Like, what? I don't know any of this. What? How are you getting this? And I think that's part of the hidden curriculum too. It's, how are y'all making sense of any of this? You know?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
you almost don't want to ask, not for stuff like
Yep.
that. You feel like you're expected to know how to do
Yeah.
that. They throw you into it so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
You feel as though I was supposed to have this down before I stepped into this classroom. And if I ask, they're going to judge me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it's just really unfortunate, but at the same time, like not everyone comes from the same institutional training. Like that's the truth. Like I I don't even know if yeah, I would say that because I also did a summer research experience for undergrad, RAU, my junior going into my senior year. And I feel like that was when I finally like started to click with like paper reading and kind of trying to break down like how do I read papers? What helps me in reading papers? And then when I came to grad school and I had to like revisit, I just revised it to see like, okay, what things do I really need and what do I still not understand about it? But like that's still multiple iterations. That's still what 3 years I'm talking about of time of me figuring out like, okay, I don't really understand how to read this paper. Like undergrad in my lab, I did my thesis in, we would do journal club, none of it. Not nope. Electrophys, nope, didn't, nope. None of
Oh,
it. Over the head.
right.
But now like I'm very in developing that confidence to know I can approach any paper even if it's something that's not in my familiar field, and I know how to identify their hypothesis, I know how to identify why they think this is correct, and I know how to identify their experiments, their results, I know how to identify all those pieces. But like it comes down to recognizing that there's pieces to identify and they don't formally teach that. Like that's definitely a part of the hidden curriculum.
They don't formally teach it. And, as an instructor, I'm like, I have a portion of my class where y'all gonna learn how to read a paper. You're not
Yep.
gonna wait till grad school. You're gonna walk away if you don't learn anything else. I don't care if you remember anything else neuroscience that I talk about, but you will know how to read a paper,
Yep.
because of that experience.
Yeah.
I had that experience.
And I'm sure you're gonna impact so many people's lives with that intentionality towards paper reading, because it just dominoes from there. Having that confidence of knowing, oh yeah, I know how to read these papers, I know how to do this. That you can walk into the discussion and not be
Yes.
overwhelmed when even though everyone did all the research on the 12 authors and know about the 12 papers that came out, you know. Like I've just been in that room way too many times. It's like, how
Yeah.
did you have all this time to go find the original paper that, and then for for
Like,
someone
where,
to literally go so far to be like, oh, we should have even read this paper. We should have been reading this paper from the lab. And it's like,
how do you know this? Right. Like, oh, I can't tell you how many times I done sat in that.
bro,
Never mind just being thoroughly confused, like with the Hopkins and Huxley papers. I don't know if you ever had to read those, but oh my God, like, ugh, how
no,
are we discussing?
luckily.
Oh yeah, that was like the foundational science, right? You got to read
Yeah,
Hopkins and Huxley.
yeah, yeah. That's the got around that with the biosciences.
I, you want to talk about confused? But they were having a good discussion. I was just sitting
Yep.
back like, I don't know what any of this means. Just give me the
Yeah,
bottom line because I don't know what this paper is saying.
yeah, yeah. Oh, goodness gracious. But that's all good. Because look, you got your assistant professor condition, like
Yeah,
it's
like
all
I made
good.
it. I made it. And now I'm going to pay it forward. If I can
Yeah.
keep any student from feeling that way to the best of my ability, that's what I'm going to do.
Yep. Yeah. And so for that, or related to that, what tips might you have for young scientists and trainees today?
Ooh, what tips? What tips? What tips? Hmm. First, I would say any kind of help you need to be able to ask. You got to be able to advocate for yourself. And who you decide to ask is really on you. I think me as a young graduate student, I felt like once I identified who my mentor was going to be, I felt like that was the only person that I could go to for help, for guidance, for anything. And
Hmm.
I really didn't have a sense of, oh, well, if I'm not getting what I need from my mentor, I can go ask this person down the hall or this person across campus or whomever I needed to ask who had the information that I needed. Like you have the
Hmm.
latitude to do that. So I would say for any young scientist, do what you need to do to get the help that you need and do not be shy about it. I know it's
Hmm.
tough. I know it's easier said than done, but this is about driving you forward on whatever your path is. And if you don't ask, you're not going to know. So,
Yep.
and if again, if the person is a jerk, you know who not to ask. But usually, for stuff like that, people are happy to
Hmm.
give you what their insights are. So kind of just getting over that. My second tidbit of advice is science is great, science is fun, science is important, but do not make that the totality of your life. Have some space for you to take care of yourself, whatever that looks like, to do hobbies outside of science that you enjoy. And I say that because I've just seen too many instances where, for some individuals, if they weren't scientists, they were nothing. And when you threaten to take that away, it just sends them into a sort of spiral. And nobody should live like that. No one
Hmm.
thing should make up who you are. We're all multifaceted individuals, and you owe it to yourself to honor all of those different aspects about yourself. So
Hmm.
that would be
Yeah.
my second tidbit. And then
Yeah.
I guess the final piece is that you can change your mind, right? Like, yes, you're on this path
Yes.
now, and it is okay for you to decide, like, after I'm done with this PhD, I'm not doing this. Or you might decide in your second year, I'm out of here with this master's, and you change your mind. I've had friends of mine do that, and it's fine. They're successful. It's not going to condemn you to this life of failure because you decided to not continue down the traditional path in academia.
Yeah.
You can change your mind. It's okay to change your mind. And there's no judgment here. I guess those are my three like tidbits of advice.
Yeah, those are amazing pieces of advice. Like, I hope people taking notes for real, because like amazing pieces of advice. Um, and so from here, honestly, I'm going to jump to my final questions. And so these are my kind of like last tidbit questions that I like to pose to everyone. So, what is something that you wish you could tell your younger self regarding your career in science?
Oh gosh. There's so much I want to tell my younger self. If I could go back and talk to my younger self, it would be, girl, relax. It's gonna work out. You
Yep.
know, I can't tell you how many times after I left academia and began teaching where I felt like oh my God, did I make a really terrible mistake? Like, especially when I would look at my peers who
Mm-hmm.
continued on in academia and saw like how their careers were progressing. And it's like, did I really jump the gun with this one? Like just really doubting myself and feeling like all was lost. I'm never going to do science again. And
Mm-hmm.
the first thing I would tell me is like, relax. It is going to work out. It is going to work out as it should work out. And yeah, I think me going into teaching and being a teacher informs what I am doing now. It makes me a better scientist because I had those experiences. And I think
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of ways, I had to have that experience for this experience. Like all things work together. Like that's one of my favorite Bible verses. All things work together for the good of those who love the Lord. Sorry to get a little
Mm-hmm.
biblical, but
Yeah.
that's a guiding scripture for me. So yeah, it'll work out.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Girl, you got it. Chill out and enjoy the ride.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest piece is like remembering to enjoy it for sure, because you're only in a certain space for a given time with these certain people. Like having these experiences, like there will be a time in 10 years when you look back and it's like, dang, I can't believe that all that time flew by and I was so worried about X, Y, Z, A, B, C, and here we are. Everything's
Yeah,
fine.
fine. It worked out.
Mm-hmm.
And I have
Yeah.
a lot of great memories with students who are still friends with me on Facebook to this day. They're grown-ups. Some of them have kids of their own, and you know, it was a good time.
Yeah. All right. So, what is the worst advice that you have received?
Oof. What is the worst advice I have received? I don't know if anyone has given me any bad advice.
That's good. Hey, that's really
Like
good.
I'm really trying to think. Like my mother's always been, whatever you want to do, Sharday. Like as long as you're happy, it's fine. So
Hmm.
that ain't it. Like within grad school, I can't think of any bad advice that I was given in grad school.
Hmm.
I think
Yeah.
it came time for me to decide what I wanted to do. I did have a lot of folks try to encourage me to stay in science. I
Hmm.
remember the the program director of my of the graduate program I was in was saying that, Sharday, I get where you're coming from. You're just burnt out. Like just, give
Hmm.
it some time. Like she was really trying to encourage me to give it some time. And she could recognize that I was burnt out. Like that's really what it was. Now, if anything, I wish I could have gone back and actually listened to what she was trying to tell me
Yeah.
versus me being so just like, nope, I'm done. I'm out. I don't want to do it. Nope, 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 nope. I wish I would have been a little
Yeah.
bit open to some of the advice that I was given, but just outright terrible advice. No, I've never gotten that.
Yeah. That's good. That's really, really good.
Yeah.
And so the last question I have for you is if you could require all scientists to know a fact or receive a certain kind of training, what would it be?
How to talk to people, like,
Mm-hmm.
and not be jerks about it.
Yep.
And I only say that. Well, no, I take that back. I say this on multiple fronts. I say that because at some point, these instructors are going to have to be in front of students. And I feel like for a
Yep.
lot of students, the way that some of these instructors come across, it is very off-putting. It turns them off to
Mm-hmm.
whatever field of science that they're in. And students remember those interactions, right?
Yep.
Like even now, I graduated college in 2007, and I remember my biochemistry instructor. And
Me
I,
too.
re- I remember this instructor because they were kind of a jerk. Like
Yep.
they weren't very nice. And that's
Mm-hmm.
the, you don't want to have that impression on somebody. So I think in that regard, you gotta know how to interact with students.
Mm-hmm.
I think Secondly, you have to learn how to interact, not necessarily with your peers who are at the same career level as you, but really interacting with those scholars who are in training, those grad students, and
Mm,
coming, and even undergrads who might be in the lab. I've heard so many horror stories of just some big shot scientist talking to
yeah,
a scholar in training at a conference or something at their poster and just grilling the heck out of that particular trainee and seeing or hearing about the effects that that has on their self-esteem and their development as scientists.
yeah,
Like, what does that do? How does that help? How does that help them grow and become better scientists? There's a way to
yeah.
deliver that information where, again, you don't have to be a jerk about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like for a lot of scientists, you got to learn how to talk to people
Yeah,
in a way that is encouraging, but still providing folks with the information that they need in order to be successful.
yeah, yeah. Amazing, amazing knowledge you shared with us today on the podcast. I want to say thank you again for being here for this interview. And also to everyone listening, thank you for tuning in. Definitely check out the show notes for more on Dr. Sharday Ewell and her work. And along with all my other social medias and things we have going on, definitely check that out in the show notes below. But this has been Monet the Creator for Navigating the Hidden Curriculum podcast. I will catch you guys next time.